Hey y'all, welcome back to Homemade Simple. I'm so glad you're here today, and we have a lot to go over today. We are going to talk about 5 chicken recipes that cost about $5 or less to feed your family this week, and they are simple, quick, easy, and affordable, and I'm really excited to share them with you today. Went to the store and picked up the items that I need. I've made you a grocery list for all of the things that we use in these recipes. I will put that down in the description below, and I will also give you a minute to take a screenshot of it. And also, all of the recipes will either be in the description box, or if they don't fit, I will pin them in the first comment below. It always helps when you have the recipe that you can refer to, so I will make sure and leave that. I'm going to go step by step, all the directions that you need to be able to make these meals for your family. They're all really quick to put together. They cook up really fast, and I think that your family will really enjoy them. So let's get started with the recipes. First up is white chicken chili. I am pretty new to the white chicken chili, but I really am a fan. It turned out really good. But before we begin with the recipe, let's talk a minute about how we got these menus to be so low cost. A lot of it started with the biggest priced item, which is going to be the meat. And I was able to find drumsticks on sale at Aldi for 40 cents a pound. That is a remarkable price, and so I was able to take advantage of that. But I did not include that price in my price sheet. You can go to your local Walmart. You can get the 10-pound bag of leg quarters for $6.72. It may not be that exact price in your area, but it will be somewhere close to that anyway. That's going to be the cheapest option unless you can find some kind of really low priced clearance chicken. So first things first, that is how we got this price so low. Now on to the recipe. I boiled the chicken in my Instant Pot, and when it was finished cooking, I reserved the chicken and the broth, and then cleaned the Instant Pot because I was going to need to use it to cook the dried beans. I used 1 pound of navy beans and covered it with probably 8 to 10 cups of water. Turned it on and cooked those beans in the Instant Pot on the bean setting for about 40 minutes. While the beans were cooking, I chopped up 1 onion and 2 cloves of garlic and sauteed it in about a tablespoon of olive oil. I did this in the Dutch oven so that I could use the Dutch oven for the rest of the recipe. I also added 1 small can of green diced chilies. You can find these inexpensive chilies in the ethnic department of any grocery store. In order to get the best bang for my buck on my spices, I go ahead and add them now. Anytime you add them while you're sauteing your vegetables, they are going to be able to meld and you're going to get the most flavor. So I add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 tablespoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, and I give that a good stir and let the vegetables and the spices saute for about 5 minutes. So now it's time to add 6 cups of the chicken broth that we reserved when we were making our chicken. Pour that in and give it a little stir, and then add the navy beans. The navy beans have cooked all the way. They are still a little firm, but with the 40 minutes of pressure cooking, they have a good firm texture but are close to being done. So I drained them and then poured the whole 1 pound of the navy beans into the pot and gave it another stir and put on the lid to let it simmer for about 45 minutes. Add 2 cups of shredded chicken, give it a good stir, and it's ready to put into serving bowls. This dish really turned out really well, but I found that it tastes much better if I added some sour cream and cheese to each of the bowls and then served it with a couple of tortilla chips. A nutritious and budget-friendly meal that your family is sure to enjoy. Next up is one of my very favorite meals, and that is chicken and dumplings. Nothing is going to make you feel like Paula Deen or the Pioneer Woman quite like being able to make homemade chicken and dumplings, and your family is going to love you. So the first thing we have to do again is boil our chicken and separate out the broth. You want to start with about 6 cups of chicken broth in your Dutch oven or in your stock pot and put it on to boil. It needs to be really hot and a rolling boil while you work on making the dumplings. Go ahead and add about a tablespoon of salt to the chicken broth. And also 1 recipe of the cream of chicken soup. You can find the directions on how to make your own down below. Give it a good stir and let it heat to a rolling boil. Believe it or not, dumplings really are just flour-coated biscuits. So if you have your favorite biscuit recipe, just use that and discard what I'm about to say. But if you need a good biscuit recipe, this is the one that I usually use. I mix together 2 cups all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I stir that together so that it's well incorporated, and then I add 1/3 cup of coconut oil. You can use butter or shortening, and then I incorporate the coconut oil into the flour with my pastry blender, and after I'm done with that, I add 3/4 cup of milk. Stir that together well and knead it as much as you need to with your hands before you flour the counter and roll out the biscuit dough. To be very thin, but not too thin so that you can't get it off of the counter. So maybe about 1/8 of an inch thickness. Get your pizza cutter and cut strips of the dough horizontally and also vertically so that you're left with a rectangle about 1 by 3 or so. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. Obviously, we're not going for perfection. This is a dumpling, but we do need to have them relatively small so they don't get too large when we're boiling them in the chicken broth. Okay, now that you have your little rectangles of dumplings, we're going to get maybe a 1/2 or 1 full cup of flour in our bowl, and we're going to coat each of the pieces with this flour and then set it aside. So when you're done, all of the pieces of your dough are going to be coated completely with flour. This is a really important step because it's going to keep your dumplings from sticking to one another, and it's also going to allow your broth to thicken. Your broth should be at a rolling boil at this point. If it's not, wait until it gets hot enough. That is a really important step for these dumplings to cook like they're supposed to. After your broth is at a rolling boil, just drop 1 individual dumpling at a time into the broth and try to stagger them so that you're not putting them on top of one another. They're going to eventually end up on top of one another, but you don't want to just dump the entire bowl into the broth all at once. You want to individually place them, or maybe 2 or 3 at a time. That way they have a better chance of plumping up whenever they hit the boiling broth instead of sticking to one another. After they're all added, it's time to give them a good stir and keep an eye on them, but don't overwork them. You just want to make sure that they're not going to stick to the bottom of the pot. Add another tablespoon or so of salt and about a teaspoon or two of ground black pepper, and then let them boil in the broth for about 15 minutes. If you haven't already deboned and shredded the chicken, go ahead and do that while the dumplings are cooking, and then add 2 cups of shredded chicken after they've cooked the 15 minutes. Put your pot on simmer and let it cook at a low temperature for 15 to 30 more minutes. If your sauce is not quite as thick as you would like for it to be, take a little bit of the chicken broth that you have left over, add maybe a half a cup of flour to 1 cup of chicken broth, make that into a roux, and then pour that into your pot. Allow that to cook for another 15 minutes, and that should add plenty of thickness. Serve these dumplings with your choice of a green vegetable, maybe broccoli or green beans, and you will have provided your family a delicious dinner for less than $5. I'm sure everybody is going to be a fan of these chicken and dumplings. Next up is chicken tortilla casserole. So to begin this recipe, dice up 1 medium-sized onion and saute it in about a tablespoon of olive oil. While the onions are sauteing, prepare 2 cups of rice using the instructions on the container. Also, this recipe calls for 1 recipe of cream of chicken soup, so if you want to make your own, go ahead and prepare that now as well. In a large mixing bowl, shred up 2 cups of chicken, add the prepared rice and the onions, as well as 1 can of cream of chicken soup. Add 1/2 cup of chicken broth and combine all of these ingredients well, and then add them into a 9x13 baking dish. Spread the casserole out evenly so that everything will bake up nice and even, and then crush half of a bag of tortilla chips. I bought these organic blue tortilla chips because they were the cheapest organic option. You can find any kind of tortilla chip that you like the best and use those. Just cover the entire casserole with these crushed chips and then add about 1 cup of shredded cheese to the top of the chips. Bake the casserole in a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes until the cheese is nice and melted and golden brown. Choose your family's favorite vegetable as a side dish, and we liked this meal topped with sour cream and salsa. That's totally optional, but I think your family is really going to enjoy this tortilla casserole. Next up is a perfect winter supper, and that is chicken corn chowder. I loved this recipe, so I hope that you will give it a try. Just like the rest of this week's recipes, it's going to start with 2 cups of shredded chicken. So if you haven't already boiled your chicken, go ahead and start that, and then dice up 3 celery ribs, 1 onion, and 2 cloves of garlic. Once you have them diced, saute them in about a tablespoon of olive oil in your cast iron skillet and saute them until they are nice and tender. You'll also want to add 1 can of green chilies to the skillet and saute those as well. Add 1 bag of frozen corn and the 2 cups of shredded chicken. Add about 2 teaspoons of salt or according to your taste, and then let this cook together on the stovetop for about 5 to 10 minutes. time to add all of those delicious flavors into the crock pot and add 2 cups or so of chicken broth. Stir this together well and place the lid back on the crock pot and let this simmer in the crock pot on high for 3 hours or low for 6 hours. Now, an important note that I need to add here is one of my viewers so kindly let me know that I was doing my crock pot all wrong. I thought that whenever I put the lid on the crock pot, I was supposed to lock it down with those locking mechanisms. She told me that was a big no-no. She had worked for the company and gotten a lot of calls about injuries resulting from people locking down their crock pot. So I know that I did that in a previous video, but notice I did not do that in this video and I will not do it in the future. I really appreciate her giving me a heads up about this, and she said that these locking mechanisms are really just for travel. So make sure that you don't use them while you're cooking and create too much pressure in your crock pot. Okay, after the chowder has cooked for 3 hours on high or 6 hours on low, add 1 cup of whole milk and 1/3 cup of sour cream and give that a good stir. Put the lid back on the crock pot and cook it for another 30 minutes or so. After the last 30 minutes of cooking, it's ready to serve up into bowls. I topped mine with a little more sour cream, some shredded cheese, and a couple of tortilla chips. I think you're really going to like this corn chowder. It tasted really good, and it just seemed to be so hearty and the perfect meal for a winter evening, especially if you are battling a cold or anything like that. The broth in this chowder is going to really soothe and make you feel much better. Last up is this cheesy chicken potato casserole. Now, this is a one-dish meal that is really hearty and tasted really good. As with all of the other recipes this week, we're going to use 2 cups of shredded chicken. So I'm sure you already have that prepared, but if not, go ahead and start cooking the chicken while you get all of the vegetables ready to put in the casserole. So I diced up 1 onion and 1 package of mushrooms. I just took the tough edges off of the bottom and sliced up the mushrooms in small pieces and then added that to the skillet as well. I sauteed these in about a tablespoon of oil for maybe 5 to 7 minutes. If you add a little bit of salt, that will release all of the liquid from the mushrooms and then it can cook off while it's sauteing. Next up, slice up about 8 to 10 small to medium-sized potatoes. I had 12 and it was way too many to fit into the 9x13 casserole dish, so 8 to 10 should be just fine. Make sure you slice them pretty thin so they'll be sure to cook through. In a large mixing bowl, mix together the sauteed onions and mushrooms and 1 can of cream of chicken soup. Also pour in 1 can of undrained green beans and mix all of these ingredients together well. Add 2 cups of shredded chicken and all of your potatoes. I hope you got a big enough bowl because mine filled this huge KitchenAid mixing bowl up all the way to the top. Add a little bit of salt and pepper to taste and then mix all of these ingredients together until they're all combined. Once you get them good and mixed, pour them in a 9x13 baking dish and bake at 350 degrees for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. The potatoes are going to take a while to cook, so make sure that you put this in the oven with plenty of time to make sure that everything is good and done by the time supper time comes. After the casserole has baked for 60 minutes or so, take it out of the oven and put about a cup or so of shredded cheese. This will top it off, and it may hide some of the vegetables that your kids are not really fans of. So this might be a good technique if you have picky eaters especially. I thought that the cheese added a really good flavor and also made this dish look a little more appealing to the eye. I put it back in the oven again at 350 for probably 15 more minutes to make sure that this cheese was good and melted. I think you're really going to like this recipe. It was flavorful and simple to put together. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I enjoyed cooking with you, and I really enjoyed eating these meals. They were all really good. They all turned out really yummy, and I'm sure that your family will like them too. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I hope that you will do that now. And if you know a friend or a family member who could use these budget-friendly recipes, I hope that you will share this video with them and encourage them to subscribe as well. I'm really glad that you're here today. I hope you have a wonderful week. I love you, and I will see you again next time.